The film opens by introducing an elementary school boy who would one day become the king of Europe's gangsters. Let's call him Nikos, a Polish citizen. He was born into a harmonious family living in a modest apartment. That morning at breakfast, his father asked about the cut on his lip. Nikos claimed he had fallen while playing with his friends. In reality, what Nikos called playing was actually fighting. From a young age, he loved wrestling and challenging everyone around him. No matter if his opponent was bigger, Nikos would beat them mercilessly. As a result, his father was often summoned by the principal to receive warnings. Late at night, Nikos would frequently sneak out to drive his father's taxi. He roamed the city streets with his friends. Until one night, Nikos witnessed a group of people who would later inspire his future, the gangsters who lived freely without any boundaries. Years went by, and a repressive government triggered a political crisis in Poland. Corruption became a way of life, and paramilitary organizations sprang up everywhere. This situation gave rise to notorious mafia figures, and Nikos wanted to become one of them. In order to start his gangster career, Nikos got his first business idea from Dorotka. She was a poor woman willing to do anything just to survive. So their prostitution business began, with Nikos as the pimp. All he had to do was connect lonely men with desperate women. Unlike his son, Nikos's father was a devoutly religious man. He would even throw out passengers who asked to be driven to brothels. Without revealing his line of work, Nikos always set aside part of his earnings for his beloved family. After all, what he earned in a single night far exceeded his father's monthly wage. Naturally, this made his father both pleased and curious. Yet no matter how much wealth Nikos accumulated, it was never enough to satisfy him. He felt his life was too dull without any real challenge. That was why he felt so excited whenever there was a client who needed to be beaten up. Unfortunately, he was forced to restrain himself when his father suddenly showed up. Nikos explained that his female friend had been treated roughly. After his father left, Nikos discovered a suitcase under the bed filled with cash. He ran off with it, prompting the clients to chase him. Nikos finally stopped in the backyard, surrounded by 3 men. Calmly, he handed over the suitcase.
Is that okay?
But unexpectedly, Nikos lunged at them, and a fight broke out. His adrenaline surged, flooding him with the deepest sense of satisfaction. That feeling, he knew, was something money could never buy. Because manhood could only be earned through combat.
Adrenalina. Charakterność.
After winning the fight, Nikos thanked his opponents. It was then that he noticed a teenage boy who, in the future, would become his right hand. Year after year passed again, shaping the history of Poland. The weakness of law enforcement gave rise to many dangerous criminal kings. Even the police and gangsters alike ended up serving those in power. As Nikos grew into adulthood, he had already become the representative of a mafia boss. His name was Maggie, notorious for being cruel and a bit insane. That night, while making love, Nikos got an important idea from his prostitute. She said that her brother worked at the central state-owned post office. He would willingly leak any information as long as he received a commission. Through her, Nikos learned the schedule for transporting cash to the capital city. Armed with this information, Nikos went to meet Maggie in a bar. He would carry out the heist if his boss gave permission. Maggie, of course, agreed, but on one condition: the mission had to be led by another one of his men named Crowbar. The next day, 2 men came to Nikos while he was exercising. They were none other than Crowbar and his subordinate. The operation plan was quickly drafted in an abandoned warehouse. Crowbar ordered Marion to scout the location and steal a vehicle, while Nikos and Junior were tasked with purchasing weapons. Each person set off immediately to ensure the robbery's success. The day before the operation began, Nikos needed to feed his adrenaline. That was why he challenged 3 men in the street to a fair fight. And as usual, after winning, he thanked them for their excellent service. Then came the day they had been waiting for. Nikos and his crew were already inside their vehicle. They moved swiftly to surround the target car after forcing it to stop. Time seemed to slow down when lives were at stake. But there was no turning back until the job was finished. They dragged the policeman out and slammed him onto the asphalt. In the end, the suitcase full of cash was seized without a single casualty. For gangsters, every success or failure had to be celebrated with a party. 10 billion in cash had become theirs so effortlessly. Yet Nikos held a different idea about how mafia business should be conducted. That was why he never liked talking too much. In that bar, Nikos again encountered the teenage boy who would one day be his right hand. It was their second meeting, which happened purely by chance. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, Nikos's house was suddenly surrounded by the police. Interestingly, he was not charged for the robbery, but for beating up the 3 men in the street before the heist. The law, it seemed, was always bewildered in the face of powerful mafia figures. It was only months later that, one by one, the rest of his crew also began to be imprisoned, including Maggie, who had been indirectly involved in their operation. Fortunately, Nikos was eventually declared innocent of the case involving the 3 men he had assaulted. His time in custody was compensated, and he was released soon after. From that moment on, Nikos was determined to start everything over from scratch. He no longer wanted to deal with gangsters who acted without any sense of caution. Nikos would build his own crew exactly the way he envisioned it. A crew whose foundation was no longer money, but brotherhood. Like rescuing a crippled stray dog, Nikos took in the lonely teenage boy who had no friends. His name was Walden, and Nikos planned to make him his right hand. But suddenly, Nikos was confronted by a group of men. Walden instantly attacked to protect his master, an act that turned out to be nothing more than a test of loyalty. With 4 loyal subordinates, Nikos formed his criminal gang. Each of his men commanded 30-foot soldiers in the field. But only those 4 were permitted to communicate with him directly. Their men were never allowed to learn the true identity of their boss. That was how Nikos operated, steadily working to become a mafia king. That day, Tyzek presented a painting worth millions of dollars. Golem said he knew exactly where it was kept. Nikos agreed, and as night fell, they set off right away. Crater easily broke open the door to the room. Their theft unfolded without any obstacles. But while exploring the room, Nikos suddenly froze, captivated by a photograph of a woman. She was the daughter of the painting's owner, and in that moment, the mafia boss fell in love. Nikos wasted no time tracking her down to learn more. It turned out she was a university student in the city.
Podobało mi się w niej wszystko.
After satisfying his curiosity, Nikos prepared to leave. But waiting for him outside was Junior. In truth, Junior was supposed to remain in prison for another 5 years. When Junior asked for a job, Nikos turned him away outright. He knew Junior must have been released early for betraying Maggie and the others. Nikos would never employ a traitor incapable of loyalty. That night, Nikos continued his pursuit of the woman he desired. He followed her to a bar, where she was sitting with another man. As soon as the man went to order drinks, Nikos made his move. Walden blocked the man at the bar to keep him away.
Wypierdalaj stąd, Adaś.
To the woman, Nikos explained that her boyfriend had just stepped outside for some reason. But she replied that they were only friends. Hearing this, Nikos gathered the courage to introduce himself. The woman, whose name was Laura, seemed pleased by Nikos's confident manner. Smiling, she revealed that she was a landscape design student. Nikos kept inventing stories to conceal his real identity. After all, no woman would want to date a criminal. Unfortunately, Laura sensed his dishonesty and ended the conversation. Realizing his mistake, Nikos tried to catch up with her. But there was no way he could confess that he was a mafia boss. Luckily, Laura was willing to forgive Nikos's awkward stammering. She asked him to take her home. In the dim glow of the night, the mafia boss and his lover finally made love. They spent the night together as if the world belonged only to them. The next morning, Nikos walked home brimming with happiness. But suddenly, he was ambushed by Junior and his crew. With no way out, Nikos was beaten mercilessly. His face was soon covered in blood from cuts and bruises. Fortunately, when an opportunity came, Nikos fought back and managed to escape, disappearing into the city. Everyone involved in the attack soon paid the price. One by one, they were captured and tortured without mercy. It was all too easy for the Mafia boss to mobilize gangs and street thugs. In the end, only Junior remained at large, still nowhere to be found. Amid the hunt, Nikos received a phone call from Laura. She could no longer wait to visit her lover's home. Without delay, Nikos went searching for the perfect house. In the backyard stood a garden he knew Laura would love. The owners, an elderly couple, immediately agreed to sell it to Nikos that very day. Meanwhile, the conflict among Poland's major mafia groups was spiraling out of control. They were Nikos's seniors, men with far greater power. As the government began introducing witness protection, betrayals and infighting erupted everywhere. Gangsters murdered each other and informed on their rivals, ending up behind bars. The power vacuum that followed was exactly what Nikos planned to fill as the new Mafia king. That night, as Nikos and Laura were preparing to go out, they received an unexpected visitor. It was Walden, his right hand, whom Nikos now regarded almost like a younger brother for his loyalty and devotion. Walden pledged that he would soon capture Junior without fail. Nikos then handed him the keys to his old apartment as a gift of brotherhood. Afterward, Nikos took Laura to visit his parents. They still believed Nikos worked as a mechanic in the city. Out of sympathy, his father suggested he bring home the old taxi, so his son could earn a living and marry Laura. The taxi turned out to be invaluable for Nikos's disguise. He could transport his men and prisoners without raising suspicion. Soon, they had already captured one of Junior's associates, ready to be disposed of. But while interrogating him, a policeman suddenly showed up. Walden quickly stepped forward and made up an excuse. Luckily, the captive agreed to pretend he had lost a bet. As a fair man, Nikos felt a moment of pity. He ordered the man to leave and stay away from crime. Then one day, Nikos was visited by an old acquaintance. It was Marion, who had formed his own gang after getting out of prison. Marion offered a partnership with profits split evenly. Nikos would only need to lend his reputation as a mafia boss, while Marion and his men handled the actual work. Interested, Nikos agreed to meet him at his headquarters. That evening, Nikos and Walden arrived as promised. Marion's headquarters, an abandoned warehouse, looked filthy and chaotic. His crew were visibly drunk and neglected, destroyed by addiction. Marion ordered one of his men, Acid, to explain the plan. He said they would rob a wealthy livestock farmer by kidnapping his daughter and demanding a ransom. Upon hearing this, Nikos immediately declined the partnership. From the very beginning, his principle had always been never to involve children or women. Moreover, he had no faith that addicts could ever remain loyal. Nikos left Marion behind without another word. But Walden seemed troubled, still thinking about their proposal. For days afterward, even while stealing, Walden kept trying to persuade his boss to accept the offer. But Nikos continued to refuse, true to his principles. That night, Nikos announced that he was going to get married. His men were overjoyed and embraced each other in celebration. When the day of the ceremony arrived, Nikos wore a white shirt as the groom. But Walden asked him to come along for a moment first. It turned out that his men had prepared a wedding gift for him, a fugitive Nikos had been hunting for a long time. Nikos was moved by their loyalty and thoughtfulness. Before the vows began, Junior was taken to the place that would become his grave. He begged for mercy in desperation, but Nikos shook his head. The mafia boss and his men took turns pulling the rope tight around their captive's neck. At last, Junior suffocated and left the world behind.
Amen.
With his vengeance finally complete, Nikos married the woman he loved. The vows were spoken over a sacred promise that only death itself could part the two of them. A festive celebration followed, filled with joy and triumph. Everyone danced and savored the life they were winning together. In the midst of the guests, Walden found love of his own. The Mafia boss gazed at his wife and his men with deep emotion. Years later, Nikos drew ever closer to the summit of power. He stayed true to his way of working, commanding everything from the shadows. Only his 4 trusted men were allowed to know the true identity of their boss. Beyond them, he simply sent orders for every criminal operation. Meanwhile, Marion never understood that being too well known would only breed betrayal. One night, one of his own men suddenly showed up and threatened him. Fortunately, the gunpowder in the man's pistol was wet from too much spilled liquor. Marion managed to survive and immediately fought back. But the mutiny only grew more intense, and eventually, news came that he had been killed. His gang was then taken over by Leonis, who had led the uprising. Unfortunately, no matter how well you hide a corpse, sooner or later its stench will be discovered. That was how Laura finally learned her husband's true identity. Walden's girlfriend, Viola, told her everything while they were alone together. But knowing who her husband really was did not change Laura's love. Instead, she began planting many ornamental trees to sell, hoping her husband could start a different life. Another advantage of staying unknown was freedom. That night, when Walden invited his boss to a bar, they were confronted by security guards. Walden, unwilling to back down, challenged them, but Nikos stopped him. Walden admitted he missed the rush of adrenaline, just like they used to feel. Nikos understood at once and agreed to join him in starting a brawl. After beating everyone to their heart's content, they relaxed near a canal. Walden always felt calm whenever he could see the water. Then Nikos received a call from an unknown number, a call that would soon make him the king of crime. To answer the caller's invitation, Nikos went to a library. He was greeted by the owner, who looked extremely well educated. His name was Daniel, the most lethal mafia boss of all. From the beginning, his power had been the greatest, without a single rival. Like Nikos, Daniel preferred to work from behind the scenes. But lately, there had been a group of gangs making the mafia stage too crowded. For that reason, he wanted to offer Nikos a job to make the city a little calmer. That brief meeting made Nikos the partner of Poland's strongest mafia. He immediately began working and mobilizing his men. All they needed to do was kill a few people and hand the rest over to the police to be jailed. By letting Daniel remain in power, Nikos's position became perfect. He no longer had to worry about any threat to his life. But for the hot-blooded Walden, it still wasn't enough. He wanted his boss to seize Daniel's power and become the king of the mafia. Nikos simply remained silent and kept his wise demeanor. After completing his operation, Nikos was suddenly approached by a police agent. The officer wanted to offer a reward if Nikos agreed to reveal just one thing: information about the Leonis gang, which had once been the crew of the late Marion. Naturally, Nikos refused outright, unwilling to break his principles as a mafia. He reminded the agent never to compare him with Daniel, who did not understand the meaning of honor. Meanwhile at home, Laura was looking for something when she accidentally discovered a suitcase. Inside was a large sum of money and a gun. When Nikos returned, he realized Laura must have already known everything. But neither of them ever spoke openly, afraid that the truth would destroy their love. A few days later, Nikos went back to the library. Daniel revealed that he was planning to retire soon from the criminal world, so his position could be taken over by Nikos as the sole ruler. But before that, a shipment of 500 kilograms of drugs would be arriving. Nikos would get his share as long as he completed one final mission to wipe out the Leonis gang that had been causing chaos. On national TV, reporters announced that the police had foiled a robbery attempt. But during the pursuit, the criminals had kidnapped a child. Later, the boy was found dead. When he got home, Nikos tried to calm himself with Laura. But suddenly, his men came carrying Walden, who was badly wounded. Nikos realized at once that Walden and the Leonis gang had been working together. When Walden regained consciousness, the mafia boss asked who had killed the boy found dead. Walden said he didn't know, because he had only participated in the robbery. Nikos felt slightly relieved that at least his principles had not been violated. To keep Walden safe, he hid him at his girlfriend's house. Walden tearfully apologized for acting without permission. By staying in the shadows, Nikos could avoid charges and evidence of his crimes. But that day, he was suddenly surrounded by police on absurd accusations: possession of a stolen ancient Egyptian statue. In truth, the real reason was that he couldn't be bribed with their offer. Without hesitation, Nikos, now imprisoned, immediately disabled the leader of the guards. Through a prison warden, Daniel sent a warning message: Walden would be killed if he could not be controlled. A few days later, when Walden came to visit, Nikos tried to calm him down. He ordered him to lay low for a while and not cause any trouble. But Walden, strung out and restless, insisted he wanted to kill Daniel so the problem would end quickly. Nikos grew furious and erupted in rage, forcing the guards to intervene. Walden realized he had disappointed his boss. But he felt he had no choice; he had to do something to atone for his mistakes. As the chaos worsened, Nikos knew he could not stand by any longer. He needed to get out and put an end to everything. The Mafia boss bribed a warden and sent his men to meet the elderly couple who had owned his house before. They were forced to testify that the stolen Egyptian statue actually belonged to them. Once freed, Nikos embraced his wife, who was newly pregnant. At the same time, Walden was on top of a building, aiming a rifle. He fired at Daniel as he walked below, but the shot missed. The attempt enraged the Mafia boss beyond measure. Nikos was summoned and ordered to execute his subordinate. If he succeeded, Daniel promised to make him his right hand. Daniel then revealed that he was holding one of Walden's accomplices captive. Nikos shot the man without hesitation or mercy. He declared that he would deal with Walden himself. In the midst of all this turmoil, Laura tried to comfort her husband. But there was no time left for Nikos to sit still any longer. He began questioning everyone, determined to find out where Walden was hiding. One of Daniel's men was secretly following him the entire time. In his hiding place, the fugitive could no longer sleep in peace. Guilt consumed him with fear and anxiety. Nikos eventually tracked down Acid and got straight to the point. Terrified, Acid finally confessed everything under threat. A gunshot soon rang out to end the matter. Not long after, Nikos arrived at the location where Walden was hiding. Two men standing in front of his target were gunned down without a word. Calmly, Nikos asked his subordinate, who had become like a brother, how he was doing. Laughing weakly, Walden tried to conceal his despair. He said Daniel had to die so Nikos could finally become the king of the Mafia. Without warning, Nikos struck him across the face for refusing to remain obedient and loyal. At last, Walden declared he was ready to die if Daniel was truly the boss's choice. Nikos embraced Walden tightly, one final time. Moments later, the Mafia boss received word that the mission was complete. Walden's blood-covered body lay lifeless on the floor. One of Daniel's men soon arrived to confirm it. A few days later, Nikos was already trusted as the right hand of Poland's most powerful Mafia boss. They were on their way to the port to receive a shipment of 500 kilograms of narcotics. Daniel said that tonight Nikos would receive his share right away, so he no longer needed to grieve for Walden because money was the only true source of happiness. Only with money could power be built and loyalty secured. Everything could be bought, including love and human life itself. Upon arriving at the port, Daniel immediately inspected his shipment of narcotics with delight. But suddenly, Nikos pulled him away to flee, as the police began to arrive. Grinning, Nikos declared that money could never buy loyalty. The proof was that today he could so easily deceive the man who had underestimated the meaning of brotherhood.
Charakterność, kurwo.
Panicked, Daniel rushed to check the situation. He found that his men had been tied up and all the drugs had vanished. Triumphant, Nikos walked away from the port. Daniel could never have imagined the strategy he had been planning all along. The police who surrounded them were, in fact, Nikos' own men in disguise. And most importantly of all, Walden's death had been a fabrication. For Nikos, nothing was more valuable than loyalty. He never hesitated to thank the subordinates who proved themselves true. And he always made sure they received their fair reward. After driving for quite some time, Nikos finally arrived at a dock. He handed his car keys as a gift to the captain, for he and those closest to him were about to begin a different life. Moments later, Walden awoke, confused and disoriented. Nikos tried to calm him down and explain everything. But Walden, strung out and tormented, kept lashing out and trying to leave the boat. His mind was completely shattered by so many conflicting emotions. Nikos drew his pistol and pointed it at him, forcing Walden into silence. He said that from this moment on, they would start everything over again. But Walden then confessed one final truth, that he was the one who had killed the boy during the robbery. The revelation left Nikos utterly stunned, as his most sacred principle had been betrayed. Holding back tears, Walden took the pistol and fired. Years later, Nikos' son, now a young man, visited him in prison. His father told him that a man must always hold fast to his principles. He was indeed a gangster, but he was also a human being.